I never thought that this would be anything big.
You're now the youngest billionaire in the UK.
Oh my God. On paper, which is just completely untrue. No individual should ever pin their self-worth on things like wealth and net worth. I don't see it as a measure of success. Honestly, I'd say if you're not motivated, then you don't want it enough. 100% today to be 1% better tomorrow. There was a point there where I'd essentially resigned myself to losing the business and the business failing.
Today, I'm welcoming a very special guest to the show, as we're joined by one of the true success stories of British business in the 21st century, who also happens to be a good friend of mine from university, Ben Francis, the founder and CEO of Gymshark. Ben founded Gymshark in 2012 when he was just 19, whilst juggling university and working as a pizza delivery driver. Now, he bootstrapped the brand from his bedroom. Ben found his passion at the intersection of business, IT and fitness, creating what he didn't know would become a billion-dollar company. In 2020, Gymshark became the second of only 2 UK brands to achieve unicorn status. That's being valued at over £1 billion with no external funding. Now, Gymshark are the conditioning brand. It creates the tools that help everyone to become their personal best. Whether it's the clothing they sweat in, the content they find inspiration in, or the community they find belonging in. Gymshark's legacy was built in the weight room in Birmingham, UK, but these days its family stands at over 17 million people across 180 countries. Despite the brand's rapid growth, Ben has remained true to his founding ethos, building a community that works hard and stays humble. Well, Ben, welcome to the Superpower podcast. It's great to have you on the show today. How are you doing?
I'm good. Yeah. Thank you for having me. It's quite cool, I think, given the fact that we've known each other now. I was thinking about this on the train down. We must have known each other now for about 12 years. Yeah. So it's weird to be doing this, but I'm looking forward to it.
And one of my first memories with you, don't know whether you know this, it's Freshers Week, and we're dressed as Smurfs.
We was dressed, we had the fancy dress stuff.
I was trying to dig out the photo for this, and I was like, I can't find it, but I'm going to find it afterwards. But no, it's great, and it's so great to have you, so thanks for coming here.
Thank you.
Now, obviously, before we've just started, you've just done a bit of an exercise.
Yeah.
A snapshot, 2 minutes into Ben's life.
Yeah.
How was that for you?
It's cool. I mean, I'm the sort of person that very, very rarely thinks about the past and tries to exclusively think about the future, so it was quite a interesting exercise that I certainly haven't done in a long time.
Why do you not think about the past that much?
Probably because I'm so busy, for one. I don't know, to be honest. I think just when we get to it, the last 10 years or so for me doing the job that I do has been so crazy. Every second and minute is scheduled, and it's I find there's never really time to stop and dwell, if that makes sense.
Well, before we get into that, where we are today and to the future, I want to go all the way back. I know you're saying we don't look in the past, so I'm just going as far back as we can. Because what is the earliest memory that you can even recollect in your mind? What is it? What was going on?
So I had two, which I was trying to think through. There was one was, I remember, so when my mum and dad's first house, where I obviously grew up for the first few years of my life, we was right next to a train line. And I don't know why, I just remember that train line. I mean, it was probably because my mum and dad says don't go near the train line. And there's nothing more to it than that. I just remember that house being near the train line. And then after that, I remember being with my grandparents, and they would live in the countryside. So I remember being out there, and I remember they had a horse and stables, and I remember going out with my nan and like clearing out the horse and like picking up the hoof and like clearing out the foot and all that sort of stuff. Those are probably my earliest two memories, and there's not too much in them. But
and are those grandparents your mums or your dad's parents?
Mums, parents.
Because I met them at your wedding. And Granddad's quite a character, right?
Yeah, he's absolutely hilarious.
Absolute legend. And so what's interesting though is I want to look at little Ben growing up then. So you're spending time with your grandparents there. What was the voice like in your mind as you were growing up?
I don't really know. It was just fun. Like, I had such an amazing upbringing. I always remember years and years and years ago where Gymshark had this like first taste of success, and someone put a camera in front of me and says, talk about how hard life was growing up and all the people that said, no, you couldn't do this. And I said, no, I had such an amazing upbringing. Yeah. And that's not to say that we were like super, super wealthy or anything like that. And equally, we weren't super, super poor. Yeah. But like I just loved so much about my upbringing. I had a really cool upbringing as well because, so my mum was a nurse in the NHS. So she'd work at the QE in Birmingham and she would do nights. Yeah. My dad would work abroad a lot. So I was also raised quite extensively by my grandparents on both sides. So I had a really cool upbringing where I got time with my mum and dad, but lots and lots of time with my grandparents. So I also had quite an old school upbringing in that sense, where, which maybe is probably more akin to an upbringing of, maybe a generation before myself. But yeah, I loved it. And I had my dad's family that was more, they were more Birmingham based, and they ended up moving out of Birmingham and into Redditch, and then his mum moved out into Wales, so I spent loads of time out in Wales, loads of time in Birmingham, loads of time in Redditch. And then there was my mum's side that lived in the countryside, and they had the horses, the dogs, and we had the freedom to play and all that. I would be riding, there's pictures of me riding a motorcycle when I'm far, far too young to be riding a motorbike. So having the freedom to do all that, I had such a varied upbringing, but it was great.
I love it because it's the motorbikes on your mum's dad's side.
Yeah.
Obviously, I remember when I met him, and he said to me, he keeps buying motorbikes now and again. He said, you know what? My wife's always been buying handbags, and she just says they just keep appearing. So I just keep buying motorbikes. They just keep appearing. But on that note, we talk about family a lot. Clearly, had a lot of impact on you growing up. But if I'm not wrong, there was a conversation March 21 when your dad called you, and he called you about your granddad. And you mentioned that was a real turning point of even more how important family was for you during that phone call. What kind of happened during that moment in 2021 when you were sharing about your granddad?
So this was on my dad's side when he'd basically had a stroke in the night, and I don't know what had happened. I think he'd got up in the night to go to the loo, had a stroke, and he ended up in the hospital, which was obviously incredibly scary for us because that was probably again, being raised somewhat by my grandparents on both sides, you always think they're invincible. Like, you think your parents are invincible, you think your grandparents are invincible, especially because my dad's dad is such a strong character. He's so strong. And he's that typical old school brummy bloke who is never weak. You'd never ever see him upset in any way, shape or form, massively into sports, and he's just a tough bloke. So to hear of him going through that was obviously not nice at all, but in typical fashion he powered through that and got through it, and he made an amazing recovery. But that was not fun in the slightest.
It's not. And I think one thing that jumped out for me was obviously at your wedding you had all four grandparents there, which I think that was my standout. I thought, wow, like Ben, 28, 29,
desperate for them to all be there.
So beautiful. And I just think that's something that's so powerful, like having them around you.
And when we walked back down the aisle, one of the memories that really sticks with me from my wedding was we walked back down the aisle, and he was in a wheelchair, so he was slightly out from the rest of the of the group. And as I walked out, I saw him crying, and I've never seen him cry, and he would just look so happy. And I think he was proud of me. I think he was proud of us. But I think he was just happy that he got to see that, because he was well aware of the fact that he might not have seen us get married. So
it's amazing. And on the other side, then you mentioned granddad's in a wheelchair, which, by the way, it's a whole nother conversation. Accessibility is so important. How was that for you then? Because you said he was always such a powerful, strong man that you looked up to, sportsman, keen sportsman. How is he now, from an accessibility standpoint? How is that for you, kind of seeing him? So he was the one that was crying. So he's the one that was in the wheelchair, and he, he's just so stubborn that he just fights through everything. I think he's finally gotten to the point where he realizes that he needs a bit of help getting around and things like that. But he's doing really, really well, and he's got like one of those electric things to help him get around again. Nice. I don't think he likes using it, but he pops around when he can, and we go to see him, so he's doing well. Nice. Now, on the note of your wedding, obviously Robin, the beautiful human she is, I want to go into Robin a little bit more. Was there a particular moment when you knew she's the one?
Well, yeah, I think so. We speak about this a bit. So I think we knew pretty much immediately. And And it was completely random. So we met, I was doing loads and loads of travel at the time. And we was working at an event in Toronto because she's from Canada. And funnily enough, she was actually moving from Nova Scotia to British Columbia at the time. So she was driving across Canada, and she stopped in Toronto, and we did the fitness event, and we met there. And I don't know, so first and foremost, she's incredibly smart. So she did like a degrees in biochemistry and engineering. And she knew fitness in a way that I didn't know fitness, almost like to a scientific level. And I think we just connected then, and then we stayed in touch. And because I was traveling around, we met in New York. I think it was like DC, Philadelphia. We were over in the West Coast as well. And then it came to a point where we were like, right, let's try and give this a go. Yeah. And at the time she was in this process of moving out to BC, and then she moved back to Toronto because it was obviously closer to the UK from a time zone perspective. And it was just never going to work. So we said, right, either I'm going to Toronto or you're coming to the UK. And because of my job, I couldn't move. She was a YouTuber influencer and everything else, so she had far more flexibility. So yeah, she jumped on a plane and flew to the UK and has essentially never looked back since, which is amazing.
And I mean, and on that note then, obviously a big change in your life that's come recently is your two beautiful twin boys. Yeah. Big life change. Yeah. How's that going?
It's like everyone says the same thing. It's the hardest thing you'll ever do, but the best. It's so fulfilling. And even though now they're only 16 weeks old, so they've like just started smiling and things like that. There's not loads of feedback. Yeah. But it's absolutely amazing, and we want loads of kids. We want to have 3, 4, 5 kids if we can. Like we're in such a lucky position. We want to have a big family, and just really, we're really enjoying it at the moment. And that's not to say it's not hard. By the way, I think it's far more hard on Robin than it is on me. But she loves it, I love it, and it's just been amazing.
Which I love, and without going into too much detail, I remember when I asked you about their names, and you were like, I let Robin choose them because it was her body and she should make these decisions. And I thought it was so beautiful because of all the people I meet.
She's in charge ultimately. That's the whole thing, right? I mean, she had to give birth to the babies and carry them around and things like that. And obviously we had loads of conversations about what we're going to call them, but that side of things, like, I don't know if this is old fashioned or old school, but like Robin is the mom. She's in charge of the home and the boys. And obviously I do my bit and I work as hard as I can with them as well. And I love every second I get with them, but I mean, she's the mom and moms know best.
So what's your average morning like now? Because we all know you're up early, bacon, eggs, all the rest of it. But now we've got the twins up, we've got Robin, what's going on?
So if they're being fed, then I'll obviously go in and say hello, and I'll leave them to it because I don't want to like ruin anything because they're in like such a strict routine. If they're not, then I'll pop in, give them a little hug and a cuddle, run down and see the dogs, eat breakfast, and then go out to work. I'm still out as early as I can be, and then I'll try and see them every evening as well, and then I'm with them all weekend, which is nice.
So cute. When I knew you had the boys, I just imagined these two little boys coming out like head to toe in Gymshark. Like, have they got Gymshark?
They've got Gymshark.
They've got Gymshark.
And to be honest, I didn't even do that. It was the guys at work that made them all the stuff up, which was great.
That's so cute. You don't do any children's rage?
We don't do any. No.
Oh, like it. Now, on that note of Gymshark, then. Obviously launched in 2012 and there's so much that we could go into, but one thing I really am interested in is the logo. Now obviously the logo's evolved over the years, and if I'm not wrong, the original idea was inspired by a mascot in America. I just wanted to go into what was the inspiration and what made you change the logo.
The original inspiration was basically there was an American, I think it was a tiger. You know, you've seen them, they run on a pitch. I mean, we do it here in cricket and things like that. And I saw that and I thought, imagine if that was like a muscular animal of some sort. Then I was Googling around and saw some more. And then I thought, well, maybe that could be a shark. And then gymshark.co.uk was available, and it was about £3 on GoDaddy. And I mean, you sort of referenced it at the start, but because I'd had all these different websites before, I'd never thought that this would be anything big. It was just another small project that I thought I would work on. There wasn't too much thought to it, to be honest. I just thought, that sounds cool. So let's give it a go.
And obviously this happens 2012, you launched Gymshark. Obviously you filled in the graph of life earlier for us, and I can see a bit of a dip here. And not to say that, you know, life is full of highs and lows, but what was going on just here then around this time?
So that would have been pre Gymshark. And I think, to be honest, there was a few things So I would say, as a young kid, I never enjoyed school.
Yeah.
I never loved school, but I didn't mind it, and I had such a great upbringing that it was sort of like that's why I'm sort of super high there.
Yeah.
Then I think as I come into my teenage years, I definitely enjoy school less and less.
Okay.
And then I think that's the whole thing of what am I going to do when I'm older and all that sort of stuff. And then I think going to uni as well was an interesting one. So first and foremost, I would say when I finished school, you finish at 16, your GCSEs before you go into college or sixth form, right?
Yeah.
And I didn't get the grades that I needed to get into the sixth form that I wanted to go to. And to be honest, that was a combination of things. I didn't really apply myself. I didn't have an interest in school, and I didn't ever get out of school almost what I thought I deserved. It sounds a bit arrogant, so it just didn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
And I think that the reason for that was there were certain subjects I would work really hard in and get terrible grades, and then there were certain subjects that I literally didn't care about, and I'd go and hit really good grades. So I ended up going off and doing a couple of days in a different school. Right. But then the school that I wanted to go to essentially had like a spare place, and my mum went in and she was like, please can you have this place? And they said yes. So I then left the school I'd moved to and was lucky enough to go to the school I wanted to go to, which was really good. And
were you studying English Lit, if I read that somewhere?
Not at that point, but so that was one of the things. They said you can come in, but you have to study English literature, because that was the one thing that I got really good grades in.
Nice.
So I had to do English Lit, even though I really didn't enjoy it. Although I learned to enjoy it. Then I did a BTEC double thing in IT, which was great because that took up then most of my time. And then I did business studies. And then that's when I think things got better, because then I got into the gym and I learned in the gym that if I put the effort in, then I would get outcomes, which was really great for me. I.e., if I go to the gym 5 days a week for a year, I'm in a better place at the end of the year than I was at the start of the year. I sort of learn how to manage school and routine and so on. And I got to do IT. And IT was a really big subject for me. Because of it being a BTEC, I found it was way better than A-levels because it was practical. Yeah. And I'm such a hands-on person. I can sort of do theory okay, but I need to see, touch and feel. And I had I had two really good IT teachers. And there was this one thing this one lesson at the start where they basically give you a locked computer and you have to get into it. Right. And that was so cool for me. And then there was another one when you had I think it was like a blank computer and you had to load Linux up onto it and do certain things. And these weren't it wasn't write an answer to this. It was do something.
So how the hell do you get into a laptop when it's locked?
I can't even remember now. They told us what to do, but it was amazing, honestly. Yeah. And it was such a fun, enjoyable lesson, and you could control everything. It wasn't like we're now doing this today. There was this long list of modules that you basically had to do by the end of the year, and they would loosely take you through them, but then it would go into everything. It would be website development, it would be databases, we did critical path stuff, we did hardware, we did software, different operating systems, and it was stuff that I was both interested in, but I could see the way that I would then apply it to my later life. Whereas there was other subjects that I was doing before that at GCSE level, which whilst I'm sure interesting to some, weren't interesting to me, or I just had this feeling that they wouldn't be of use to me later on in life.
Now, you mentioned software there, right? And I know there's something you've spoken about in the past where you liken your mind to almost being like a computer. Yeah. And the software that we put in and out of our brains almost. What's the most important software you've put in your mind in your career so far?
Oh, God. I'd probably say routine. Yeah. Honestly, I think routine's really important because, and that comes to the gym and that comes into work as well. I think in the same way that a computer just runs basic processes and you set it up to do certain tasks, I think you have to try and get yourself to do that as well. And obviously the clear example that I would use is going to the gym. If you're just going to go to the gym, you'd sooner do 3 days a week for a year than 6 days a week for 6 weeks and then nothing. And I think just building habits into your life which are beneficial. We have a saying up in our gym at work, and it says 100% today to be 1% better tomorrow, and it's all about those incremental 1% every single day that I think over a prolonged period of time improve you. And I think it's so much of it is behavioral, and I've got I'm fortunate, right, to have worked with loads of intelligent and talented people and met a load of people that have been probably far more successful than I ever will be, and just being able to watch their behaviors they act in a way that I aspire to act like. And that's not to say that they're not super smart and all these other things, because I do think there's certain things that are somewhat out of your control that some of the most successful people I've met have. But then equally, I don't think just being naturally smart is enough to be successful in life. You have to have these like programs and these routines, these habits, and the work ethic.
So you mentioned like routines, processes. Like some people might say, oh, but Ben, I'm not that motivated to have a routine. Obviously, you're quite like disciplined and regimented. What would you say to people who are listening who think, yeah, I just need to like get my life in check a bit more? What can they do?
Honestly, I'd say if you're not motivated, then you don't want it enough. Because I hear that all the time. I think people saying, I'd really like to, I'd really like to be good at X, or I'd really like to be good in the gym. And it's like, well, there is literally nothing stopping you from doing that. Yeah. And that's not to say that you need to try and climb Everest in a day sort of thing and do it all at once. You could just, you could do one thing today that will get you one step closer to that. And I do think it's just about being humble in your approach, because that's another thing that I think that we've done well at Gymshark, is we never sat there, particularly in the early days, and said we want to be a $1 billion brand, or we want to do this, and we want to have this many customers or this many followers or anything like that. It was always everything was a really low bar. So it was, let's make a website that transacts, and okay, so let's get a transaction, let's get regular transactions, let's get customers that are going to come back to us more than once. Let's do our first event. Let's sell at that event. Let's do 2 events. Like, there was never this huge, massive goal. It was more of a case of like small incremental gains on a regular basis that then slowly add up into the longer term ambition. And I think taking that into your personal life as well, or at least for me, has been incredibly powerful.
And on that longer term ambition then, I want to go quite long term, because you launched in 2012. Let's go to the year 2112, which is super interesting because it's...
Well, I'll be dead then.
Yeah, but we'll Gymshark.
Hopefully not. That's the aim, right?
And so what's interesting about that year, by the way, 100 years of Gymshark, is it's what I was having a look, palindrome year. So it's written the same way forwards as backwards. And that doesn't happen often. It's 2112. There's an event going on. How are people talking about Gymshark?
Hopefully is the iconic lifting brand and the iconic gym brand, in the same way that Land Rover is the iconic 4x4 brand, and the way that Victorinox is the iconic Swiss Army knife brand, and the same way that Burberry has the iconic trench. I want Gymshark to be the iconic brand in its space.
And have you got a vision, do you think, in the future? I'm going back into the kind of years in the future. Your boys might be there. Might be kind of in their 80s or something. My math's probably wrong there. Do you see them being involved in Gymshark one day?
Oh, that's a big question. I would say on the balance of probabilities, no.
Okay.
I'm not. I don't know. This is what I need to look into. I'm not convinced that's a good long-term thing, and I think they should have the opportunity to pave their own way in life. And listen, if by coincidence and competency all these things align and that's the place for them to be, then I think that would be great. I think on the balance of probabilities, it's unlikely though. Yeah.
Now, on that note of starting businesses and family friends being involved, I think there's something else that I wanted to ask your thoughts on, and that's when people are raising money. So with that startups, scale-ups, and they think, I need more investment. Yeah. Now, obviously, you bootstrapped at Gymshark at the start, and for listeners who don't know what that is, it's obviously using internal funds and not raising external money. Yep. I meet so many people today who are kind of like, I need to raise money. And I sit down like, what do you need it for? And often I can't articulate it properly. What are your views on people bootstrapping versus just raising money, especially as a startup?
I see it as almost like a final scenario once all of the business models have been tested. Because there are certain models that I think you just have to be bootstrapped for. Yeah. I think it would be very, very hard to start a big tech firm without some form of investment, given the cost of development, unless you're some sort of savant developer that can literally build everything yourself. But even then, you'd have to question, would you then have the ability to market and sell that as well? But I personally am a fan of building profitable and productive businesses. So I would say 9 times out of 10, I think you should focus on that ultimately, building a profitable and productive business. And that's good for lots of different reasons, because intellectually it's challenging. But 2, in terms of the construction of your business, it means that you're more likely to retain more control as a founder which in the long term will be better for you, but it also could give your company a competitive advantage from an agility and speed point of view, because then you have centralized decision making. The more you the more that you borrow money and you bring investors in, whilst there are huge benefits to that, and you can fuel growth in a way that maybe a bootstrap business can't, you then water down the ability, in my opinion, to be agile and make quick entrepreneurial decisions, because by definition you've got more interested parties with different opinions.
And I was reading a book recently. Have you read The Founder's Dilemma?
No.
Somebody's recommended it recently, of this whole difference of, do you want to be a king of a kingdom type thing, or do you want to have a smaller part of the pie? And it's massive, and very few go on to achieve that. Obviously, we see names like Bill Gates, Richard Branson have done very well. It's on that note, you've done this as well, which, again, very few people achieve. And one thing we can't shy away from in this conversation is what's happened recently, which you're now the youngest billionaire in the UK. And just for those listening or watching, I'm going to give...
On paper.
Okay, yeah.
None of it's real.
I know we've got the most humble person that we'll ever meet here, but just for a bit of context, the average billionaire, according to Forbes, is 65 years old. And there's only 15 around the world who are age 30 and under. 11 of them have inherited their wealth. 4 of them are self-made, and you're one of them. How does that feel?
I never think about it. And I actually quite found the news articles quite... I don't see it as a measure of success. And I think it's all on paper. I think people assume that there's some bank balance with my name on somewhere that has billions in, which is just completely untrue. It's never been the goal, and the articles aren't helpful. They're nice and it's great. I love the compliments. I love the fact that Gymshark's getting the attention. I'm not convinced the articles have a net positive effect for me personally, but it's cool. And I'm super, I don't want to put a down on it. I'm super proud of what we've achieved and what I've achieved. And I think, like, if I think back to growing up and, riding on a little motorbike when I was a young kid, and the likelihood of me being here from that age is probably one in a several million, I'd imagine, probably tens, if not hundreds of millions based on that math. But I don't see that as a KPI personally.
I think that's a good thing to bust a little bit here, because if people are thinking, oh, what, a billionaire's got £1 billion or dollars in the bank, obviously we know that's not how it works. It's based on their assets, and assets by definition fluctuate in value. It could double, it could half. There's all of these things that can happen, and that's why I think it's important that no individual should ever pin their self-worth on things like wealth, net worth, or anything, quite frankly, financial. I see that as a wildly unproductive way to live. And personally, it's something that I'm not massively interested in. And like I said, the articles are great. I hate looking at them. I don't read them. I almost would rather just forget. There was a point where there was loads of them popping through, and I just turned my phone off, and I thought, I don't want to see that. I just want to focus on my job, because I don't do it for that. I do it because I work with great people. I'm working on a cause that I genuinely care about and am passionate about. And like I said, it's great, but it's certainly not the be all and end all. But I know in the past you've said success for you is kind of freedom, happiness, prosperity. Yeah. And I want to dig into freedom. What does that look like for you? Freedom
for me is the fact that I literally spoke to my granddad about this the other day, my mum's dad, and I said, I get to wake up every day and do exactly what I want to do with really cool people. And I get to see parts of the world I never thought I would see. Yeah. And I get to connect with people I never thought I would get to connect with. And that's where maybe things like that, those articles and that thing that came out the other week is useful, because I can connect with people and just learn from people. And I get this turbocharged, supercharged approach to learning, because if there's something that I'm particularly interested in, I'm fortunate enough now to be in a position where I can speak to industry leaders or thought leaders in that place, and they'll be kind enough to share an hour of their time with me, which I think is really, 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 really beneficial.
But do you know what? I think we've got an opportunity here to help people, because there's this, you can say if it's a myth, that people think money buys happiness. Constantly hear it. You meet people, you look at social media. Does money buy happiness?
I'd say to a degree.
Okay.
There's clearly a level.
Yeah.
There's a level, I don't know, I swear I've heard this. There is a level, and I don't know what that level is, where basically you can, as long as you can pay your bills, you're in a nice enough house, you can cover food and fees and whatever it is for your kids, and you don't have to panic as you get into the third week of every month. I think then obviously the value, the link between happiness and wealth probably then diminishes after that point. So I don't want to sit here and say, oh no, money doesn't buy happiness, because I absolutely think it buys comfort and freedom and all those things. But I do think that finance and money does give you freedom, which goes back to the previous point. But if personally my wealth increased or decreased by 10%, I think something that I need to make sure that I continue to have in my character is that wouldn't affect my feelings of self-worth and so on and so on.
That's such an important message for people, though, because so many people will be striving for the next goal, and often monetary goal, whereas, as you know, it's that inner self-worth. And people will say, oh yeah, but money does buy happiness. Do you think that they've almost got to experience having some form of money or comfort in order to know that feeling?
Possibly, but then some of the happiest people I know are by no means millionaires and aren't the wealthiest people that you'll ever meet. I think it's an outlook of life, and I think some people are cursed. I think maybe to a degree, I think I'd count myself in this as well, by the way, cursed with an innate level of competitiveness that will never ever go away. On the extreme end of that, there's that the Michael Jordan documentary where, what's it called? But basically, he's sat at the end. You go through the whole thing, and you watch it, and he's like this billionaire sportsman. And I don't think anyone can watch that and think, oh, was that really worth it? You don't seem particularly happy. Like, you're not sat there doing backflips. And I think I always have to pinch myself, and I always think I'm living in the best period of my life right now. Like I said, I wake up and I do what I want. I meet cool people. I travel the world. I've got 2 happy and healthy children. I've got a wonderful wife. My parents and grandparents are all alive, and that's the most important thing for me.
It is, and I felt we've got a guest coming on the show in the future, Mogul Dat, who speaks about happiness, and he just says it's that quiet contentment feeling of, I like my life as it is right now. And people get this confused in the world today. But you said that, you get to wake up and everything is great, you get to make the decisions. Now, making those decisions that you get to do day to day and having the control can't be easy. And people often, I meet, struggle how to make the right decision. How do you go about making a decision?
Depends on the decision. I will always skew towards instinct personally, but then given the scale of the business now, there's a degree of data and information that I think needs to be overlaid by that. So it really depends on the decision. If it's a product decision or something creative, then I'll almost exclusively led by instinct. If it's projections around revenues, customers and whatnot, then obviously that will be heavily data led.
And obviously looking at your graph again here, like the dip down in the 20s, and then obviously we're on a nice upwards trajectory, which is always good to see. But Ben, what's been the most difficult decision that you've had to make in your life?
The most difficult decision?
I know it's not an easy one.
No, I don't really know, to be honest. I would say the big dip here, downward trend, would be when Lewis and I essentially went our separate ways in the business. Whether or not that was a decision or something that sort of just happened, I don't know. I think you could probably call that as the most difficult period, and that was tough. But then, again, I'm an eternal optimist. I like to look at everything as a positive. The thing that gave me was there was a point there where I'd essentially resigned myself to losing the business and the business failing, and there was a point where I was flying home from the States, and I was jotting down ideas of, do I go back to uni? Do I go get a job? And is that job, do I just go back and do a pizza thing, or am I going to try and get like a proper job, for lack of a better term? Do I want to stay in the UK? Do I want to go abroad? All these things. Do I try and start something new again? And whilst that was so hard at the time, everything after that I felt like was a bonus. And I think so much of that has fueled Gymshark, and it's helped give me that level of optimism and that mindset, which I now carry with me every day, because everything feels like a bonus. Because that was a particular time, but there's been times where I've just had to come to terms with the death of Gymshark, the failure of the business. That since then I think everything else, and this is personal life aside, from a professional point of view, once you've come to terms with the fact that the business is going to die, then everything else is fairly easy, and it can be put into context.
And I mean, obviously we can see an upward trajectory. Business didn't die, it did quite the opposite. It's absolutely flourishing. And I'm always interested in how people think, right? And what goes through your mind. Negotiation is pretty critical, whether that's the negotiations going on at the dips in our life, but you probably negotiate every day. I know people listening to this might be renegotiating their salary or negotiating terms with investors. Like, what goes through your mind when you're about to go into a negotiation? How do you like prep for it? Is there a process, or do you just like trust your gut?
Very much gut led, and I think it really depends on what you're negotiating. I mean, I've negotiated with lots of different people, lots of different companies on lots of different things, big things, small things. I mean, the deal that we did with GA to a degree was a very, very large negotiation. Personally, I think go into the negotiations with good intentions and goodwill. I've met people that go in hard and tough from the beginning, and they hold their cards so close to their chest. And whilst I think that's a useful strategy if you're never going to see that person again, but I think, again, on the balance of probabilities, you probably will see that person again. So I think by going into negotiations in a positive, productive, and open way, I think, even though I think a real hard negotiator who really understands this space would probably challenge me and go, yeah, but Ben, you're probably going to end up leaving money on the table or getting a suboptimal deal. In my experience, a suboptimal deal with a great relationship and a point where everyone's happy moving forward tends to be more beneficial than a really harsh deal, and you really squeeze someone to the point where they're not 100% happy and bought in with that deal. And again, it really depends. Like, if I'm an individual that's wanting to go to negotiate my salary, I haven't actually been in that position in my entire life, so I'm only speaking theoretically here.
Everybody at Gymshark's going to be coming to you tomorrow.
Everyone's going to be coming,
which is going to
be great fun. Again, I think do it with the best intentions. I mean, listen, if someone was to come to me and go, Ben, I want this, or I'm going, and I've got this other job, I would not even enter a negotiation with that. I would go, okay, well, you've already got one foot out the door, so no hard feelings whatsoever. I'm going to go, write you a lovely reference because you've done great things here, but I think you need to move on and go somewhere else. If someone comes to me and goes like, listen, I think I'm adding this sort of value, here's some things that I've achieved, here's some things I'm really proud of, I'm well aware I've still got some things that I need to work on, and I'd really like your support on those, but this is where I think I should be, then that's such a good conversation to have. And you can agree, you can disagree, and there's a conversation to be had there. And I can imagine that's quite a daunting conversation for an individual to have. But that would be the way that I would approach it.
It's tricky though, but like you said, and I'm not going to get all scientific on it, but so much says that the most effective negotiators want to build trust, and at the end of the day build a relationship, because nobody likes a hostile environment. And so I think you're completely right. Now, before we go any further, and I kind of share what I think your superpower is, that from knowing you over the last 13 years and today, one thing I have to pick up on is somebody once likened you to a Cocker Spaniel. Right? What was going on there? I know you're no longer a Cocker Spaniel. I
don't know. I think I just run around doing things all day. I don't know, to be honest. I can't remember. I think it's just, again, like, I just running around, like, doing things all day. I like to be active. I like to be in the gym. I like to be walking around the office. I hated having to work from home for too long. Like, I like to be around people. I love meeting new people. I don't know, I think it's just that. And like, I like to get my hands dirty and actually physically be with the product in the factory, with the people, doing things. And I think, I don't know why, I don't know if that's a personality trait. I don't know if that's a thing that I've just got from my family and growing up in the family that we did. But yeah, I'd imagine that's it.
But you're not, I don't think you're a Cocker Spaniel anymore. You said that you manage your energy a lot better.
Yeah, I think
you're
so.
a bit more of a Doberman.
I get a bit aggy if I'm not in the gym that often.
Okay.
If I've got like excess energy, you know what I mean? Yeah. Sounds stupid. If you haven't walked a dog for a week, then they get mental. No, I definitely have to get in the gym, and I try and get into the gym at least 3 or 4 days a week. Even just to sort my head out.
Even if you're traveling.
Yeah.
I think that's so
Or
important.
get outside. That's the other thing as well that really gets to me.
Yeah.
Not being outside. So if I'm off for a week, I'll try and be outside as much as I can. I just love being outdoors.
So true. And I think like people underestimate nature. Like I've never met anybody who said I regret taking a walk.
Yeah.
You know, people always come back a little bit better.
Yeah.
Now, Ben, before we go into what I think your superpower is, now I've got to write it down because didn't know it at the start of today. So I'm going to write that down and we're going to a bit of a discussion about it. I've got a bit of a quick fire round for you.
Cool.
A few questions, right, that I just want to throw at you. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Ready? Okay.
I'm ready.
What world record do you think that you'd have a shot at beating?
What world record? Oh my God. I've got no idea.
I'm never going to make these easy.
This is probably
fire.
a better for someone else to answer.
Nah.
What world record would I have a shot at beating?
It's funny I say this because I'm in a good conversation with Guinness World Records at the moment, and they just go wild about ideas.
I've got no idea. Lil, can you help me? There must be something. I've got no idea. It's something around consistency, I'd say.
Okay.
I don't know. Some sort of I could do the same thing. I'll tell you what I could do.
Yeah.
I could if you said to me right now, you have to eat the same breakfast, lunch and dinner, the same food, whatever it is, the same meal every day for the rest of your life, I would sign that and do it with complete ease. And I would never, ever have a desire to veer off that track.
Love that. Well, I've got people from Guinness World Records who are probably watching from London and Dubai, so I'm sure they might be in touch with that one. Right, but next one. Right, you're having a dinner party.
Yeah.
3 guests are coming.
Mm.
They dead or alive, but they're coming to who are you inviting and why?
Oh, these are really hard questions. Why couldn't I work on these before?
I know, sorry.
Dead or alive? Okay, so number 1 is 100% Winston Churchill.
Oh, nice.
100% Winston Churchill. Number 2... This is really hard.
I love having like quick fire. They're actually like the most painfully got to think about questions. Promise to get quicker.
Would it have to be? Would it be Steve Jobs? Probably Steve Jobs.
Oh wow!
Just because it's just fascinating. It'd be interesting, wouldn't it? Number 3. It would probably be. There's an old picture that we've got in our family of my great grandparents.
Yeah.
And they was out fighting in World War II. I'd probably want to meet them just to know what their experience was like. Because there was 2 brothers. There was 3 brothers. 2 of them actually met. They randomly met each other.
Wow.
And then there was, I think, one of them was at the liberation of a concentration camp. So I would definitely like to meet them. Or one of those.
And Winston throughout the war. There's a lot of war theme going on at the table.
Yeah.
You sit next to him. It's amazing. I think it's an interesting point. If anyone listening, I think we should all do more to help the elderly.
Yeah.
You know, I was with a 95-year-old who's here in London. Sat with her the other day. She's quite lonely. And honestly, just teach me about like the Blitz and the war. There's just so much, like you say, to learn from them. So I think anybody listening, especially if they've got elderly neighbours.
They're the reason that we're here today.
Yeah, exactly, mate. Okay, right. Well, we'll change the mood up a little bit, though. Right, favourite holiday destination?
My wife's going to hate me saying this.
Go on.
England. I love it here. I absolutely love it here.
Like
and this is the thing. So growing up,
Yeah.
I was like, I can't wait to go to all these places.
Yeah.
I've seen so much of the world now.
Yeah.
This is such an amazing country. I love it here so much. I would just stay at home
Eating the same thing.
and I'd just work around the house. I would genuinely, that was it. And I did it a few weeks. I had a week off and I didn't leave a 10-mile radius of where I live. That would be Robin's wouldn't. Robin's would be some beach somewhere where it's really warm and nice and all sand and all that. But no, I would quite happily stay here.
Nice.
I love it here.
Right, with this one, it's what comes to your mind when I say body power?
Gymshark.
Nice. Okay. Seamless.
Vital. Leggings. I mean, I'm wearing seamless now.
I don't know. Okay. Family.
Oh, everything.
And the final one I think everyone will want to know. What's your Nando's order?
Oh, it varies a lot now. No, it's a bit weird at the moment because I've been sort of coming off the carbs a bit.
All right.
6 thighs, plain.
Oh, no, plain.
Yeah, it's just the most boring meal that you'll ever have.
You can't take the
I
spice.
did have chips the other week, but I can absolutely have the spice. I'm just trying to avoid sugar and carbs, so I just have plain thighs, 6 of them. They do them like as a 4, and then you can top them up with 2 extra.
Okay.
What?
Yeah.
Eat the most Nando's. Yeah.
Okay. Right, Ben.
I knew your surname would come in handy one day, by the way.
I know, right? We didn't know where it would come in, but yeah, here it is. Well, I get the banter from people, you're going to call your kids Solar or Wind. But I was like, I think I can think of it better than that. Anyway, no, Ben, obviously getting to know you over the last kind of 13 years, university up to where we are now, and the conversation today, I think there's one thing that's always stood out to me about you. And what I thought was, and have confirmed today, is your superpower. And that's that one thing that you might be like, no, it's not, Gian. I hope that's not the case. You mentioned today about your processes, your routine, and how important that is. And I also don't forget at uni, you might not remember this, but everyone was going to the cinema and everyone was getting like popcorn, hot dogs, whatever, and you had carrots and hummus, right? And to have that level of self-control is remarkable, right? Because not everybody in the world has it. And so the superpower I think is yours is discipline.
Oh, thank you.
And it's something that I think is so underestimated around the world. Because motivation, right, is when you want to do something. Whereas you keep saying, I could do the same thing day in, day out. I stick at it. And I genuinely believe, and I could be wrong, that's led to so much of why you are incredible in what you do. What do you think about the word discipline?
Well, I like it. I actually think it's true. I've never actually thought about it for obvious reasons, but I think that would definitely be true. I think even little things like getting up at the same time, going to bed at the same time, eating at the same time. Yeah, I think for me, consistency and discipline has been incredibly important. And it's something that I learned the first day I stepped into the gym at 15, 16 years old. And again, that whole 100% today to be 1% better tomorrow thing, absolutely makes sense. And that's not to say that every day is a great day, but I think if you can just learn something or do something on a particular day to improve yourself, I think that helps. And I think you're right. I am disciplined in that. And every week now, I wasn't doing this before, but I lift a consistent amount of days a week.
Nice.
I'll read a consistent days a week into separate subjects, which at the time I'm interested in. As of 2 weeks ago, I've started running every week, which at the moment I absolutely hate. I absolutely hate it, but I'm doing it because apparently it's good for me.
But can I just drill there? So you hate it? Because I think a lot of people listening, but this is the issue, like they hate it and then they give up. So we've got a live example, not like in running, but you're sticking at it. Why are you sticking at it? Because I want people to learn from this.
Why am I sticking at it? Because even though I hate it, I know in my heart of hearts, the net benefit to me is better. And I've got this view of what I want Ben to look like in the future. And Ben of the future is a charismatic, athletic, successful individual with a great family life, happy and healthy kids, that is competent in the areas that I want to be competent in. And when I look at other people that I admire, they're in shape. And I do think that physical shape does have an impact on mental health and mental shape. And for me, just being able to lift weights to a certain level isn't enough. And I do like the thought of running. And to be honest, the running thing came out of, I was watching that SAS program they did, and then I started Googling and going, if I wanted to get into the SAS, what would I have to do? And I was like, I could probably do that. I fancy myself there. And then it had like the cardio stuff, and I was like, oh my God, I get battered then. So I thought I want to be able to get to a point where I would, my sort of ambition is by 32 be a level of fitness and health so I could pass those sort of military fitness tests. So fingers crossed I can get there.
Like that. And what do you think about this? Because I think discipline, traditionally, we spoke about the war as well, can be quite a harsh word. You look at the armies around the world. And I read recently somebody likened discipline in a different way to like self-love. Not getting all fluffy here, but they were kind of saying that instead of, when you wake up and you're like, Ben, get your ass out and get running right now. Or you could say, Ben, you're going to feel great later on. You're going to feel fantastic if you just get up and just go for that run now. Are you more of the like, what's that voice like in your head? Like, get your ass out now.
I heard something years ago that really stuck with me. And it was words to the effect of, people get given medication by their doctor and so on, or they get told to do things by their doctor and they never do it. But then if it was a family member, or even worse, a pet, if a vet gives you medication to give to your pet, everyone gives it to them. But when it's themselves, they make all these excuses and there's reasons why not, and so on and so on. So I think you're right. If you really did care about yourself, then you would treat yourself like you would treat someone else. And the reason that people tend to treat other people better or give other people better advice is because the emotion, the excuses are pulled out of it. So I just think like, Ben, if you weren't you, what would you advise you to do? And I would say, Ben, I would advise that you run at least once a week. Like what is once a week? What's 20 minutes a week, whatever it is, whether it's 1K, 5K, whatever it is. That will, in the long term, benefit you. It will mean that you can set a better example for essentially your family and your children. And, you know, it might mean I can live a longer and happier and healthier life.
Nice. Now, and I think on that is beautiful, because I think a key message there is to everybody listening is speak to yourself like you would a best friend, because people are quite harsh on themselves sometimes. Whereas actually, if you speak to them like you would your best friend, you're going to get far more out of it, which I think is really powerful.
I agree.
We've shared your superpower, which is discipline, but I've got one final question before we wrap up today, Ben. And we've spoken a lot about Gymshark into the future. You know, we might not be there in 2112, but there'll be a legacy. What's a legacy that you want to leave behind and you want Ben to be remembered for?
Ooh. Well, obviously, personally, I want to have a great family. I want to raise great, well-rounded children that go off and do whatever they want. I whether or not my kids or my family are financially successful, I genuinely don't see as a KPI. I think the main thing for me is I want them to feel the freedom to do what they love, whatever that is. And then in terms of me, I like I said, I want that happy and healthy family. I want to be a great dad. I want to be a great business person. And I want to be someone that's like, I guess someone that's like a man of their word. I feel like if I say I'm going to do something, I want to be someone that does it.
Yeah.
And I want to be someone that I guess people can trust.
Yeah. Powerful. And I think just to reaffirm that, there's certain things that you've done for me over the years that have stuck with me. And you probably won't remember them. At turbulent times for me, you wrote me a card in 2015, you know, and then even, you know, recently with things going on, you drop me a text message. However you discipline yourself, you remind yourself, you do it and you stick to it. So I've got to give you credit there. You're already doing it. I'm sure you'll be remembered for that into the future. So from me, Ben, it's just honestly a huge thank you for the conversation. You are an inspiration to so many people around the world listening to this. You've inspired me in my life and just so incredible in all you've achieved. You're very humble. We know that word is kind of, you know, comes out about you, but I hope you're so proud of yourself because we're so proud of you.
Thank you.
Can't wait for the future. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Also, a thank you to you, our listeners, for being part of this community. By watching, subscribing, liking, and also leaving comments on all the videos, it honestly really helps us to grow the show and to invite more incredible guests to join us in the future. Now, our plans are super exciting, and with your support, we can make this even bigger. And so if you do enjoy the show, please do hit the follow button on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you're listening to the podcast. It really means so much to me and all of us at the Superpower Podcast. And if you're watching us on board your in-flight entertainment, remember to follow us when you land, or maybe you've got Wi-Fi in the sky. For now, it's a huge thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode of the Superpower Podcast with me, Gian Power.